what is Nelson Peltz trying to get out of this?
Well, he's trying to get the things out of it that Nelson Peltz is always trying to get out of these things, right? Which is, we can squeeze cost savings. We can run this business more efficiently. He argues that Disney's been overpaying for assets for a while, especially the Fox deal from a few years back. He criticizes them for having gone after Sky, which they did not win, but were willing to bid up the price quite a bit on. He says it's time to shake things out and have a little more focus on operating margins and restore the dividend. He's calling for the dividend to be restored by 2025. Remember, that went away early in the pandemic, as it did for many companies.
Now, none of these perhaps challenges and concerns must be that much of a shock to Disney. They know that they've had some issues. They've just announced changes at the board level, perhaps, and a focus at least on succession. But ultimately, they're not going to want Peltz on the board.
No, they very much do not want Peltz on the board. I think Bob Iger would like to, have a chance to run this show himself without input from Nelson. But they are, sort of acknowledging that there's at least some public-facing changes that they need to make. One interesting little piece of brinkmanship is that Peltz was supposed to unveil his big campaign this week, and Disney actually got out ahead of it with the announcement of the change in its board. Now it says Susan Arnold had already hit the age limit, I'm sorry, not the age limit, but the tenure limit to be on the board. But the coincidence is there, if you want to read into it. They also did announce that they're establishing a succession committee at the board level. So that's a signal to investors, hey, we know we need to set our course on the future and decide who will eventually replace Bob Iger in a couple of years. That is very much sort of a first volley in what is likely to be a months-long fight.
This is like one of those stories where you actually do need some context of recent history, where Iger has returned as CEO, having retired, quote unquote. They'd only just renewed Chapek's contract before he was dismissed, essentially. We actually asked our audience if Peltz has a point here. Does Peltz have a point? These are the results from the Twitter poll that we did. I'm not entirely surprised by this. 61% of respondents asking who is Peltz. The answer really is he's a classic activist, isn't he? And he built up that stake in November. I guess, does he have any track record of achieving these things?
Absolutely.
Can he change Disney?
Absolutely, and you can argue that he already has with these moves, right? But you look at examples like Procter & Gamble, General Electric, the executives of those companies would say he very much changed it. There's a great example of DuPont, which is a company that he didn't actually win his activist fight, but the CEO was out months later. They had a bunch of cost cuts they announced, so he is a big deal, and he will make his presence felt.